Please join me in the chalice lighting word. In the light of truth, in the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
Our opening words are by UU minister, Reverend Margaret Weiss. The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not a steeple above the tree-lined streets and cars. Rather, it is a people proclaiming to the world that we are here for the work of healing and of justice. The church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar, but rather person linked with person, linked with person, all ages and genders and abilities. A community built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. The church is not just a set of doors open on Sunday morning, but the commitment day after day and moment after moment of our hearts creaking open the doors of welcome to the possibility of new experience and radical welcome. The church is not simply a building, a steeple, a pew. The church is the gathering together of all the people and experiences and fear and love and hope in our resilient hearts. Gathering, however we can, to say to the world, welcome, come in, lay down your heartache, and pick up hope and love. For the church is us, each and every one of us, together, a beacon of hope to this world that so sorely needs it. Come, let us worship together. Please raise your spirit and voice to join the UUA virtual choir in singing our opening hymn, We Are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage.
It's Not Easy Being a Unitarian Universalist, an adapted reading by Charles Magistro. I'm amused by the view that it's easy to be a Unitarian Universalist. It's as easy to be a Unitarian Universalist as it is to be persistent, courageous, and curious. It's as easy to be a Unitarian Universalist as it is to search the murky waters of life without sure charts to guide us or guarantee that we will find a safe port to put down anchor. It's as easy to be a Unitarian Universalist as it is to overcome the natural fear of the unknown and venture forth with nothing to sustain us save our zest for living and hunger for new experience and knowledge. Our way in religion is not the way of ease. We are called to be sailors, for many worlds exist waiting to be discovered, and not the least of these worlds are within ourselves. It takes as much persistence, courage, and curiosity to look out into our own depths, to come to terms with the twin mysteries of being alive and having to die, to see ourselves in new and larger ways without being dishonest about our limitations. As it did for many sailors to sail thousands of miles into an unknown ocean until they found dry land.
Not what I expected. I have been to several General Assemblies where I delighted in worshiping with several thousand other Unitarian Universalists. I saw old friends and made new ones. I sang in the massive, amazing GA choir, and I marched in the banner parade. I was a delegate and was frustrated when I participated in the business sessions, wondering how the religious faith that I was a part of could be so focused on Robert's Rules of Order. After that first GA, which was all shiny and new, the others came to be just what I expected. Not this one, and not just because it was all online. Sure, there was inspiring worship, photos of previous banner parades, and the still amazing GA choir. But what was different was the content and its effect on me. I saw worship called collaborative planning of highly interactive family worship by a minister and a director of religious education. Their service takes place from 10 to 10:25 every Sunday morning before the regular service, which starts right after at 10:30. This family service requires serious collaborative work to bring the concepts and ideas to life in a way that young children can understand. Taking one concept from the regular service, the idea is often presented as a story using puppets or dolls. The attendees are asked to interact with each other and discuss the big question of the day. The congregation intentionally does not laugh at anything a child might say in response to a question. This helps the children feel more comfortable participating. And yes, they have continued this service when they switched to online services this spring. This could be a wonderful creative opportunity for our congregation to consider. However, the most impactful workshop I saw was called Spirituality, a Narragansett Perspective. The Narragansett Indians are descendants of the Aboriginal people of the state of Rhode Island. Archaeological evidence and the oral history of the Narragansett people established their existence in that region more than 30,000 years ago. One of my interests is studying Native Hawaiian spirituality, and I wanted to see how the Narragansett traditions compared. But what touched me wasn't that the Narragansetts celebrate the 13 new moons of the year, or they have gratitude for all that the earth provides. It was the speaker, a native Narragansett herself, a living practitioner of this spirituality. You see, GA was supposed to be in Rhode Island this year, and 2020 is the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower at Plymouth Rock. I was blown away by this speaker, presenting her culture and her people as a living, breathing presence with pictures of present-day religious ceremonies. I grew up in New Jersey in the 1960s, where there were, of course, native peoples living long before my ancestors landed on these shores. Yet the only evidence of these long ago lived people was the little cabin we stayed in at the local Girl Scout camp that was named Lenni Lenape, after the Lenni Lenape tribe. We were taught in school that the history of this country, this land, started in 1620 when the Mayflower landed. That this land was essentially a blank slate before then, with perhaps a small number of native people living there who might have put up some resistance to leaving after teaching us to grow corn and celebrating Thanksgiving, but then they just somehow went away, leaving their names on highways, mountain ranges, and cabins. I was surprised to see this native Narragansett woman presenting her people as a viable present-day culture in Rhode Island. It just wasn't true that an entire race of people went away quietly, or at best, moved to reservations somewhere out west. Well, out west, because the story was told that they didn't stay on in New Jersey, or Massachusetts, or Rhode Island, because that is where the people who landed on the Mayflower came to live. And so the people did live there, because they were destined to do so. But it turns out that the Narragansett people are alive and practicing their spirituality, celebrating the 13 new moons of the year right in Rhode Island today. My own baby steps at research have shown me that descendants of the Lenni Lenape and the Ramapo Indians are also alive and living today, some in Oklahoma and Delaware, and yes, in New Jersey. Mary Byron, in Widening the Circle of Concern, report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change, writes about the joy in spiritual work, and she quotes Arundhati Roy, who says, "The trouble is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you've seen it, keeping quiet, saying nothing, becomes as political an act as speaking out. There's no innocence. Either way, you're accountable." So now I've seen it. I am taking a deep breath in and out, over and over, feeling the anger in my heart at being taught lies about those people whose land we took. The native people just didn't go away. I have been working my way through the Widening the Circle of Concern, the report of the Commission on Institutional Change, addressing institutional racism within Unitarian Universalism, and wondering again how my religion, Unitarian Universalism, with its first principle of affirming the inherent worth and dignity of all people, could be so far behind in actually doing what we say we do. My heart breaks again. And so I invite you to join me in learning and opening our eyes by reading Widening the Circle of Concern, the report of the Commission on Institutional Change. We have a copy here at the church, and a free PDF is available for download on the UUA website. Read it. Let's talk about it. Let's all see it, my friends. And then let's be accountable together. May it be so this day and all days. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Lori Nichols, and I'd like to share my reflections on the General Assembly. back in June. The reason why I really wanted to attend this particular year's General Assembly was because it dealt with the 400 years since the first colonists came over on the Mayflower. I have an ancestor that came over on the Mayflower, and when I read that our Unitarian Universalist religious ancestors also came over on the Mayflower, that really hit home with me. So this got really personal for me. Now, I was taught from a really early age to be very, very proud that I was a 12th generation European American with an ancestor that came over on the Mayflower. And I heard stories about all my childhood about how my brave ancestors fought off the what we called Indians, and we, to protect our women and our children and our lands that we took, that we landed on and we settled on, and how we tamed the wilderness. So as a child, and I was raised in quite a white bubble as well. So as a child, I remember watching Westerns and really thinking, well, that's not very nice of those white people to be so mean to those Indians there. The Indians weren't doing anything. This is where they lived. We're the bad guys here. But I didn't have a sense yet of the trauma that was involved in all this for the indigenous peoples. I did not understand the dynamics of settler colonialism. Boy, do I now. Have I learned this from GA? I didn't know that the term settler colonialist was code for genocide. Stealing indigenous people's lands for profit, and about white supremacy. I kind of knew it in the periphery of my being and experience, but it wasn't right front and center like it is now. I didn't live near reservations. I didn't have any contact with Native peoples. So I don't really have any experience except what I was told and what I saw in my white privilege bubble. I do remember in the early 70s when Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee came out, and I read that. I was so horrified. I was beside myself, but life started happening. I went to school, I started working, paying bills, and so that kind of went by the wayside for me. I didn't really have time to explore it more deeply. Now I have the time to delve into this because of the COVID pandemic and choosing to stay home 99% of the time. I wanted to learn more. I want to educate myself. I want to come to terms with my ancestors who were perpetrators of these atrocities. So I bought the book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, and it is by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who was one of the speakers and who was the speaker, the presentation that really affected me most deeply of the variety of speakers that I listened to. This book was a winner of the 2015 American Book Award, and she is a longtime activist for Indigenous people's rights and has Indigenous heritage as well. So I started reading this book. Wow. Tough read, tough topic. The author noted that the Puritans had a covenant with God to take the land. A covenant with God. So their religion, their faith, taught them that they had a covenant to take the land of these people. It was theirs, manifest destiny. The very existence of the United States is a result of looting an entire continent and its resources. Wow, how do I come to grips with that fact that my ancestors were perpetrators of these atrocities? Whew, I was having a tough time with this, and then Reverend Laura shared some wisdom with me on this topic. She said, invite your ancestors into your space, and through your work, give them the grace to heal the harm done. That was what I needed to hear. It's exactly what I needed to hear. So So in my daily contemplations, I have felt their presence. I have invited them in. I have felt their presence. I have chosen to forgive them, and I wish them peace. I will end with words from the late Native historian Jack Forbes. While living persons are not responsible for what their ancestors did, they are responsible for the society they live in, which is a product of the past. Assuming this responsibility provides a means of survival and liberation. Thank you very much.
There will be better days. 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 Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. I am there will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. I am
General Assembly was completely virtual this year, and it was a first for the association. They have offered it partially virtual in the past and will continue to do so in the future. And with that in mind, I highly recommend that you mark your calendar and plan to take part next year to get a true feel of the diversity and depth of our association. These 5 days were filled with challenging topics: invigorating worship and music, wise and studied speakers and workshop facilitators, passionate and dedicated leaders, along with authentic conversations with others across the country over Zoom to reflect on happenings of the day, and finally some fun mixed in that showed the many rainbow colors of the UU ministries. It is very clear to me that we are part of a rich and diverse history and a part of a very vibrant and cutting-edge association striving to move progress forward on several topics that need it. I decided to attend worship at 6 a.m. each day and did so from my bed. The textures and depth created a beautiful container to hold some of the very difficult topics that we addressed. Some highlights. A workshop entitled Partnership and Solidarity encouraged us, being white, to check our egos, find humility, and while using experience, seek opportunities to empower others, people of color, to do their work, allow them to lead, and come alongside their work of liberation that they know how to do, and support it. Similarly, in a workshop entitled Creating a Community of Communities, Paula Jones's work and writing, she explored and talked about building beloved community. This is through covenantal community rather than transactional or contractual communities. Here we see the divinity in one another and see one another as a gift. In governance, it isn't control at the top, but it creates equality between communities, shared leadership, and is dedicated to multicultural collaborative team and ministry building where all ministries report to the board. She is also the author of the 8th Principle, which is a commitment to building beloved community through action and relevancy. One of the featured speakers was Reverend John Buren, a former UU president, and he shared from his new book, Conflagration. It was about spiritual friendships as transformation, and it was beautiful. And Dina Gilio Whitaker spoke on indigenous knowledge and how that knowledge can inform solutions to environmental destructions. Her book, As Long as Grass Grows, The Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock, just sounded really interesting. A particularly poignant talk was on settler colonialism and a history of erasure and exclusion, where mainstream history often excludes indigenous, immigrant, or refugee perspectives. A current example of omission is in the musical Hamilton, with little or no inclusion of indigenous people's experience. The Ware lecturer this year was Naomi Klein, Canadian author, social activist, and filmmaker known for her political analysis and criticism of corporate globalization and of capitalism. She spoke about the Green New Deal and actions to combat climate change in a very volatile world. A question during our reflection that night was posed: how is our congregation dealing with the issue of climate change? A song chorus by Kiali Rachel, Wanting Memories, rung through my mind and soul several times after it was offered in one of the sessions, as it became kind of a mantra for me. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty of the world through my own eyes. In a breakout reflection group, a new friend, Dorian, a retired Baptist minister from Baltimore, said that the UU plans church around people's lives, but other Protestants plan their lives around church. I think that might be my experience, and it has implications. A workshop on building communities to counter white nationalism and white power brought many stories throughout history using propaganda to segregate, influence, and create fear. It addressed some ways that we can recognize and counteract the extremes. Musically, I enjoyed a workshop offered by Heather Pearson and Bernice Martin, and with their permission have begun sharing some of their songs, like, Slow down, recharge, take a breath, and remember who you are. Worship times were very different in a virtual, recorded world, but still messages and music were powerful and moving. The diverse and passionate leadership the association has had over the last several years has broken through some deep prejudices and institutional blocks that show we are on a better path, which means we are, in a way, leaders in the country for recognizing, challenging, and rebuilding our institutions for the future. General Assembly was a challenging and very fulfilling experience and a very welcome change during the days of COVID-19 and tweets. I close with a poem entitled Fitted for the Day by Kimberly Quinn Johnson. It includes words of June Jordan in her poem for South African women, which she presented at the UN on August 9, 1978. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fit for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for.
My General Assembly experience started several days before everyone else's. The UU ministers hold their ministry days typically in the 3 days before GA. This year, we started weeks ahead by having our business meetings and worship spread out over a couple of weeks in order to make it manageable for all of us to attend. And this year, it was especially important for us to gather. After years of study, research, and small group discussions, we were voting on revisions to the ethics and guidelines for our professional organization. The ethics and guidelines provide a framework for how ministers are in relationship with their congregations, their congregants, their colleagues, and those they supervise. Unfortunately, as we have witnessed with other religious institutions, there is a history of ministerial misconduct in our UU ministry. The ethics and guidelines help define and name the power differentials in relationships and the vulnerability of individuals in those relationships. In our ministry, we have experienced misconduct ranging from sexual harassment to financial misconduct to abuse of power to sexual misconduct. As we know, and as I have preached many times, we as humans are imperfect, and each of us are vulnerable and capable of choosing to do harm, even our ministers. The revisions we voted on address the loopholes people found in adhering to the original ethics and guidelines, specifically addressing accountability. Previously, when ministers violated ethics and guidelines, there were no repercussions the professional organization could take. It was only handled by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is a UUA committee that oversees ministerial credentialing. Also, when violations occurred, a good officer, or what we know as an advocate for the ministry, was contacted. And instead of using a good officer that was trained, the guidelines allowed for any minister to step into the role of a good officer. This meant the advocacy was not for the larger ministry, but instead for the specific minister. And we found when a specific minister was being advocated for, then more harm was done to the health of the congregation and the larger ministry as a whole. In addition, the new revisions no longer allowed a minister to use a legal defense to avoid being held accountable. Finally, much like the thin blue line of the police departments, our original guidelines did not allow for colleagues to speak negatively about each other. This meant violations were not transparent, and some ministers were allowed to move to new ministries without the congregation's or colleagues' knowledge of those violations. Our revised ethics and guidelines allow for transparency now when harm has been done. So you would think, as ministers who lead our congregations in this work, this would have been a slam dunk and no controversy would arise. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and like I said, made it especially important for our membership to be present during our ministry days. Why was it difficult? Ministers were afraid of being punished. Unfortunately, what those that held this fair failed to see is the previous ethics and guidelines were based on punishment only. If a violation occurred, the one repercussion that happened was they were kicked out of the professional organization and left on their own. Rather than continue this method of punishment, the new ethics and guidelines created a new system which held ministers accountable and gave them a path to heal and repair the harm they have done. This path is built with a new structure to the Good Officers Program. Over the next year, the Good Officers Program will change to encompass specializations in chaplaincy, right relationship, organization management, call contract negotiations, and resource allocation. I am part of the team creating this new structure, and I'm excited in how it will change the support for my fellow ministers and myself. I think it's incredibly important to be transparent in the ethics and guidelines I have committed to in my work as a minister. Therefore, I will be sharing them with you in my weekly minister's message on Wednesday. Please let me know if you have questions. I would be happy to answer them. You will have one more chance to experience what was offered at General Assembly this year. Over the Labor Day weekend, our worship service will be one of the morning services that was offered during GA. If you would like to know more about attending General Assembly next year, either virtually or in person, then feel free to talk to Lori, Christina, Kimbris, or myself. We would be happy to answer your questions. Let's take a deep breath in and out. Our prayer is by Reverend John Behrens and Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker. Hope rises. It rises from the heart of life here and now, beating with joy and sorrow. Hope longs. It longs for good to be affirmed, for justice and love to prevail, for suffering to be alleviated, and for life to flourish in peace. Hope remembers. It remembers the dreams of those who've gone before and reaches for connection with them across the boundary of death. And hope acts. It acts to bless, to protest, and to repair. Amen. Please raise your spirit and voice to join the UU Thrive Choir, and we shall be known.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Please join me in the chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please raise your hands in the spirit of connection for our closing song.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
I'm gonna dunk down, down into the river. Gonna dunk down all the way down. Dunk down, down into the river. Gonna let it go all the way down. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go all the way down. Letting go all the way down. River, river, free and wild, all these knots are coming untied. River, river, you humble me. Here I come, come wash me clean. I'm gonna dunk down, down into the river. Gonna dunk down all the way down. Dunk down, down into the river. Gonna let it go all the way down. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go all the way down. Letting go all the way down. I'm gonna dunk down, down into the river. Gonna dunk down all the way down. Dunk down, down into the river. Gonna let it go all the way down. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go. Oh Lord, here I go, letting go